fear is the one thing that derails candidates more than anything else.
He used fear as a superpower because he effectively planned his success.
So it's helping the client change their life and make their life better. Hi, I'm Mark Schnurman, founder of The Perfect Franchise. Welcome to The Perfect Match, our series where we take you behind the scenes on real franchise placements. In each episode, you're going to meet one of our consultants, in this case, Tony Carrella, and a franchise developer, Patrick Spaan. They work together to help a client find the right business. It's more than finding the right business, though. It's helping the client change their life and make their life better. So you're going to learn about what makes a brand a great fit for a candidate, how the process unfolded, and really what happens behind a successful franchise placement. Now, whether you're exploring franchising or just curious how decisions are made, you've come to the right place. But before we get started, Patrick called out my hair, so I'm going to wear a hat because he thought it looked a little funny. So it's all good, Patrick. Love you, man. My wife makes fun of my hair too. Although I don't know that you were making fun of it, but if you talked to my wife, you would have been. All right. So with that said, so like I said, today, the two participants are Tony Carrella, one of the top consultants in the industry, and Patrick Spaan, with TeamLogic IT, one of the best developers in the industry. And The Perfect Franchise and TeamLogic have done a lot of good for our clients over the past number of years, and we look to continue. It's a wonderful brand. And so at The Perfect Franchise, what we do is we do not sell franchises. We help people make decisions about whether a franchise is going to make their life better or not. So it's a little bit of a different approach probably than our peers, and I think it's inures to the benefit of our clients as they move forward. So with that said, Tony, I want to turn it over to you. If you could tell us a little bit, and again, no last names, but a little bit about the background, the skills, strengths, maybe some of the challenges of your candidate, and why they were looking at franchising in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. The client recently that we placed, his name's Jose. He was Jose was exiting his corporate role, and he was a senior level HR executive, very sophisticated. I would say a very professional individual, and I would even say conservative. So his journey was he felt like he wanted to explore franchising. The interesting thing was that he actually a year prior went pretty far along with another brand and just didn't have a great experience going through the process. So restarting the process with him kind of introduced a little bit of new set of challenges because he came into it probably a little more skeptical than someone just starting from scratch.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And so what made you think of TeamLogic for this candidate?
Well, funny enough, so as we go through our process, we get to know the client and we introduce a handful of brands to that client, and the brands that typically resonate to them, we connect with them, and TeamLogic was one of them. But the interesting thing was that he didn't select TeamLogic on the first round, and as he started talking with the other brands, I can just tell that things weren't just clicking for him. So I kind of put a pause for a second with him, and I said, Jose, dude, would you mind if I kind of gave you a suggestion? Do I have your permission? And he said, absolutely. I said, gosh, after getting to know you for these weeks, the more I get to know you, TeamLogic would be a great fit. And I know you didn't select it initially, but I highly encourage you to have at least one conversation with Patrick and just at least kind of go dive into it a little bit and figure out really if it's not right for you. And ultimately, the reason why I knew it was right for him is because of his characteristics, his demeanor, his professionalism, and how he worked with people. I knew would be a great fit with TeamLogic, and I knew TeamLogic would do a great job with Jose, and that's really what kind of put it all together.
No, that's great. And before I turn things over to Patrick, just want to frame the process that we use at The Perfect Franchise so people understand, have a little context around what Tony just said. So typically, we will introduce our clients to 3 brands. And evidently, Tony mentioned TeamLogic to the candidate, and the candidate said, I'm going to pass on that. And then what we do, because the deeper we as consultants go in the process, the more we learn about our candidates. And the more we learn about them, you know, our calibration is usually correct at the beginning, but sometimes the candidate doesn't see it, or we learn something that changes it. So Tony went back to the client and said, no, you really need to talk to these guys. So that's great consulting and listening to your client and getting the feedback. So with that said, Patrick, when the candidate came your way, what were your initial impressions?
Well, our business concept is a very, very consultative, very people driven, business results driven process. We're trying to understand if a candidate can get in and get to know a business owner, get to know what's going on inside of that business, and can then begin to suggest technology solutions and AI solutions, security solutions that'll benefit or drive that business. Jose has that skill set, and the way that we determine that is by getting on a Zoom call with him and taking him through what we would consider sort of a basic job interview, so to speak. Ask him lots of questions. Has he managed employees? Has he had to accomplish any goals or any initiatives for his company? And he sort of bit right into that subject matter and talked about his leadership style and the number of people he led in his previous organization. And so he had a really large skill set that is almost identical to the perfect candidate for us. And that's what I love about working with Tony, is that I don't get these guys that I have to vet out for 4 or 5 or 6 calls to figure out whether or not they're going to fit. As soon as Tony recommends somebody to me, I know these guys are well suited. They're professional. They ask second level questions, not just first level questions. And so it was very easy on that first call to determine Jose's fit here.
No, that's great. And one of the things that I think is important as we go through this is that the perspective of the developer and the consultant is often different as they're going through this. So, what were some of maybe the client challenges, concerns, things that they liked as they were going through the process, and how did you address them? And then I'll ask Tony the same question, because oftentimes we see things very different based on our relationships.
Yeah, well, for Jose, it was more about market analysis. It was more about, is there an opportunity in, he is in a somewhat rural county, has good population of businesses, but it's a pretty large footprint. And he was trying to determine that. And that was the major sort of focus of his time and attention with me. And so we spent a lot of time in data analysis. We pulled a lot of national data from industry think tanks. We pulled that up. We looked at employment data. We looked at a lot of data, growth data, the psychographics, et cetera. And that's really what was the primary hang up, the primary concern for Jose. And so our philosophy is not to try to sell somebody on a market. Our philosophy is to say, let's dig in, let's get that data, let's analyze it together and see if this really fits. And that's really what Jose appreciated.
No, that's great. And so, Tony, from your perspective, feedback on sort of the same question.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, he came into the process with a little bit of skepticism because of his past experience, which is fine. So we had to kind of overcome, let's say, just barriers that perhaps predispositions that he had in his mind about franchising in general and brands. So that was some work, let's say, that I had to do. But bringing him to TeamLogic, one of the things that always resonates with me with TeamLogic is very particular about the candidates that they bring into their system. And as the candidates go through the process, they might at first feel like, hey, I feel like I'm interviewing to join this organization. But then they quickly realize that they're doing that because they want to take care of the entire organization. And so they take it. So that's how we kind of came over, because that effectively just instilled a deep sense of trust with the client and overcame any of the predispositions. The other thing too is the validation that he went through with TeamLogic helped, because Jose was very conservative, and which he has every right to be. But the validation from the other franchisees helped him make sure that his decision was based on sound facts. And so those were the kind of the elements that we had to kind of go through with him.
Awesome. So just a couple thoughts on the discerning nature of it. You know, as you go through the process, if you're a franchise candidate, you don't want to be rubber stamped by a brand. You want the brand to make an assessment as well. And by doing that, what happens is you reduce your chances of failure. Why? Because it's all about fit. Are you the right cultural fit? Are you the right skill fit? Demeanor, financial. And every brand's different, and they have very nuanced expectations and franchise candidate profiles. And so you want a brand that's going to put you through a little bit of a process because that ensures that they're looking for the right fit. The other piece is that I would say, this is something Patrick hit on. This is a little bit more of a rural area, and for those of you who know where I live in the sticks, so I appreciate rural areas. But oftentimes it's harder to find brands, and so if you're in a rural area and you're looking, there'll be opportunities, but your territory will have the same number of businesses as Patrick said, and maybe even more, but it's just a little bit more geography. So it's a give and take. You know, if you're in New York City, you get a one block square and you could have everything you want, but it comes with its challenges. So there's a balance, but there are opportunities for sure in secondary and even tertiary markets. All right, so guys, with that said, so why did the client ultimately choose the brand, and why do you think they're going to be a great fit? Patrick, you're up first. Tony, you're second.
Well, I think they chose our brand because we have a very, very open brand. Tony kind of hit on it earlier. We encourage our candidates that get this far in the process with us to reach out and speak to a lot of franchise owners. And the way that we set this up is that franchise owners complete a form or call me directly, give me feedback on the candidate. I explain this to the candidate and I let the candidate know that once he finishes validating with franchise owners, he or she, we then sit down and we talk about the feedback from the franchise owners. And we do that because they're operating these businesses. Nobody can recognize success factors better than somebody that is out there successfully growing our business. So when they talk to an operator, our operators come back and say, you know, this is why we like Jose. These are the questions he asks. Serious guy, smart guy. He's done a lot of research on the market, et cetera. And it gives the candidates a sense of comfort because this isn't coming from a sales guy that is saying, hey, this is why I think you're a fit. This is coming from operators that say, we know how to be successful. He carries the successful traits that we need in franchise ownership. So I think that's a big, big thing for us.
It's great. Tony?
Yeah, what's interesting, I stay in touch with my clients on a ongoing basis after they start, just to see if I can help in any way and also understand what they're going through. And Patrick can probably validate it, but Jose's doing very well as far as he's launching, and kind of some of the things. And it's not a big surprise to me because he's extremely methodical, very intentional about everything that he does. But one of the things that sticks out is a lot of our clients end up having fear hold them back or stop them, slow them down. He used fear as a superpower because he effectively planned his success. So any of the concerns that he had, he looked at it and said, and methodically figured out, how am I going to figure this out? Because I don't want this to happen to me. So I'm going to plan to make sure that I build a successful business, and it's proving itself in numbers for him. So that's kind of what the biggest thing that sticks out with me with Jose.
No, awesome. And so I appreciate your guys' feedback. I will tell you, Jose seems awesome. What I love is, you know, and I always would suggest to my candidates, like when you're looking at a brand and, you know, after the first few calls, which is just understanding the brand in the intro, and you go into validation, and validation is when we talk to other franchise owners existing in that system. When you do that, if you go in with the mindset that I'm doing this brand, even if you haven't ultimately made that decision yet, but going with that mindset, if I do this brand, what are the ways that I'm going to supercharge my launch? What are the ways? And ask people questions like, hey, what would you have done differently in your first 3 months? Where would you have focused more energy? What would you not have done? Right? Because if you can understand what dials to turn and levers to pull, you can supercharge it. So it sounds like he did that. And then the other thing is Tony mentioned fear. Fear is the one thing that derails candidates more than anything else. And if you're honest with your consultant and your developer about fear, they can move you through it. Fear should not be a stop sign. Fear is a yield, proceed with caution. Use fear to supercharge your due diligence, your discovery, your decision making, and you will wind up with a much better decision. And the reality is, all of us on this call, we are independent. We are business owners of our own lives, right? And businesses. And the reality is such that we have fear every day. I know I wake up every day and I'm scared, and that motivates me to work harder, to work smarter. And it seems like Jose did that, which is tremendous, because fear is just your mind telling you, I just got to make sure I check all the boxes here. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So with that, I really appreciate you, Patrick, for joining us in TeamLogic. Our partnership with you, appreciate Tony. Continued success and doing what you do. And for all the listeners and viewers, thanks for watching or listening to this episode of The Perfect Match. If you're thinking about franchising or just want to understand what the options might be, we'd love to help. Feel free to reach out to me or Tony directly. Also, subscribe to our channel for more insights, more success stories, and franchise education. If you're willing to take the next step, just exploring, we at The Perfect Franchise are here to help you. And again, if franchising makes your life better, we'll help you. And if it doesn't make your life better, we'll tell you shouldn't do it. Thanks, everybody.